But the reality is, when it comes to hiring NFL coaches, I am ageist.
Is it just NFL coaches?
There are other things.
Seriously, like what?
President? I don't think the president should be an octogenarian. Sorry.
We didn't have a choice this year.
I know, but it's an issue for me.
The two choices were old.
Yeah, there are certain things in life I don't think you need an 80-year-old doing it.
I'm going to tell you honestly, when early in my my marriage, my husband, belonging to a golf club, we would be at the club often. And I realized that this was a big part of his social life. And very, very early on, and I would say, we got married, I was 34. So I got married a little bit older. But I said to him, are all your friends 50 years old? Like, it really blew my mind that every time we were there, that we were either playing golf or going to dinner or having drinks with people who were in their 50s. And myself being in my mid 30s, it just blew my mind. I thought, are all your friends in their 50s? And he found it really strange that I said that. But for me, in my background, I didn't hang out with people that were older than me. I have siblings who are older than me, but I didn't hang out with people who were 20 years older than me until you start working in the workforce. And now you are like Jack. Jack's a young buck. And Jack is producing for two women who could be his mother. And probably older than your mother. Yes. I will confirm that. I know that for a fact. I know Kristen's friends, so I would say yes. So it really is a weird dynamic when you start working, and you might go out to drinks with people, or you work with people, or in your case, you're producing.
Yeah.
You're co-hosting with people who are 30 years older than you. So it is an odd dynamic at times. And so I found it very, very interesting when the ageism came up, because I thought it was a very fair question to ask.
Well, and like, I would use my role with Cap and Hoodie as an example. I don't think Cap and Hoodie, who are older than I am, would want a 50-year-old producer necessarily. Maybe they would. Maybe they'd find a great one. And I should even go older. You don't need a 60-year-old producer. There's only so much ability a 60-year-old has to connect to a more modern audience that's in their late 20s, early 30s. It's just, there's a disconnect there. We can all work well together, but I think having the diversity in age is good. In the NFL, a head coach has to connect with players who are between the ages of 22 and 40. And I think the older that you get, the more old school you get. I do think you can't teach an old dog new tricks is pretty true. And when I look around the league, I don't think it's coincidence. The older coaches are the ones who are less enthused about more aggressive Dan Campbell style fourth down decisions or 2-point decisions. It's the younger guys that are doing it, that have embraced it.
There's also an issue going on with the lack of experience. And it's also why you're having so many clock management issues in the NFL, because coaches don't come in with the same experience anymore. Although Mike McCarthy is one of those guys who has a problem with it. And he is one of the more
who's one of the worst of all time at clock management? Andy Reid.
So it continues to be a problem. So I guess I can't really put that on the younger coaches, because it is some of the older coaches who have that issue.
Like, was Matt Eberflus bad with clock management because he was a younger guy relative, or because he was a doofus?
Well, I would say that it's both. Not having to worry about it before, but he had a guy in his ear that told him when to do things.
I'll bet that guy was old.
No.
How young was he?
Young.
Too young? Because there is such a thing as too young. I'm sorry. I'm not sitting here hiring a 22-year-old to be my head coach.
Is Harrison Freed not the analytics guy that tells him?
I don't know who it was. I know they fired their director of analytics.
But I believe Harrison Freed is the guy that would be in his ear and tell him when it was time to call a timeout, when it was like, go for it. He gave him all the analytics for a head coach. early on, Matt Eberflus talked about how Harrison Freed really helped him. He's the guy that was in Hard Knocks telling Caleb who the officials were for that game, giving him a rundown and the background of who all these guys are. And this is what you need to know. This official likes to call this. This official calls that. So he's not an old guy. It's actually a younger guy.
I wonder what it is with clock management. And it's an interesting point you brought up because Jack, help me out too. How many coaches in the NFL do it well?
I'd probably say half.
Half? I don't think it's anywhere close to half.
You think it's less than
that?
that?
Yeah, I think it's way less
I
than
would
half.
say it's half. I think I see some good moves.
There are times, like Vrabel had an amazing clock management moment that everybody looks back on. I think it was a playoff game. He had the one against Belichick where he got Belichick to smile at him from across the field. He's been great at it. There are a lot of guys, like Tomlin's had mismanagement. Raheem Morris in Atlanta mismanaged the clock every which way he could at the end of the season for Atlanta. There are Todd Bowles, historically, awful clock guy. Horrible. Andy Reid has had trouble with it. I think that's just, I don't know what it is about clock management. Guys don't get it right.
Right.
Dan Campbell has effed it up this season at times, but I think he's on the bleeding edge of the analytic fourth down decisions and stuff like that. He's embraced future football. I want somebody I think is going to do that.
Well, that goes with the whole like gambling generation of football fans. And now that gambling is acceptable and it's your whole generation grew up with it where it's legal, it's acceptable, people talk about it. The older generation, you didn't talk about it. So I don't think they paid as much attention to that. Now you bring in someone who grew up with it, you have a little bit more of a gambling mindset.
Yeah.
You have a little bit more of the, I'm going to take a little bit more chance. Whereas the old school guys are coaching by their gut. They're coaching by, what's the safe thing to do. They don't take as much risk. So I think it's interesting. I don't know how much like game management. Now you're going into the clubhouse, the locker room in football. Now you're going into the locker room. Now you need to find a guy that not only can be the CEO of the team, knows how to build a coaching staff, can relate to the players now in the locker room too. I don't know who that guy is anymore. I really don't. I don't know if you really have to be the guy that is everything. I think you purely have to be likable and the guys respect you. It's in any sport. You know how quickly that can turn? All those Bears players were saying how much they liked Flus. We would all ask them, what is it that you like about him? Oh, they all gave us a million answers. And you know how quickly that turned? When they started losing.
They'd say that he holds them accountable. They'd say he
didn't.
loved playing for him. He's really hard on us. And then once things went sour, he wasn't holding them accountable. They let him run the room. He let them do their thing. They were running too free. They need to be. Look, for me, it boils down, and I probably simplify it too much, I can admit, but I make it pretty simple. I come from the Yurko school on this. If you win games, your players are going to like you.
Yeah.
If you lose games, your players are going to hate you. Last year, right, Mike McDaniel's this big popular character, and he's got the Dolphins playing real good football. They get into the playoffs. Tua has this resurgence. Their offense is incredible. Everybody loves him. This year, you were just telling me in the break about how he said he couldn't find players enough. They just didn't care. What's the difference? This year they lost. Last year they won.
Right. It's that simple. And that's why it's such a turnstile of coaches in that role, because once your message no longer reverberates, you're gone. Like you're gone.